Chapter 48-35. Knowing that Fingzhou had something to do, Songmi didn't waste any time. She let Fingzhou rest in the room while she went downstairs to borrow the kitchen. She made 2 bowls of wontons and brought them up. After eating the wontons, Fingzhou said a few words and left alone, leaving Tunyun to protect Songmi. After all, along the way, she found that as long as people knew that Songmi was from the Song clan, they would always have designs on her. Although Songmi wasn't completely defenseless, she was still her kitchen maid. She naturally couldn't let anything happen to her when she wasn't around. This place was the territory of one of the 4 great emperors who had attacked her, and it was close to her territory. That was why she had chosen this place to annex it. She had been here for a few days. Sometimes she would go out to inquire about some information. Therefore, she had a rough idea of the situation here. Today, she was going to go to the floating island in this world to see if the great emperor was on that island. She soared into the sky towards the clouds. As she was not sure which corner of this territory the floating island was in, she released her divine sense to search for the location of the floating island after ascending into the clouds. After about the time it took for an incense stick to burn, she opened her eyes. Light flashed through her eyes, and the corner of her lips curled into a half-smile. The floating island was hidden in the clouds with a boundary and a concealment formation. If it wasn't for her mental strength, she wouldn't have been able to sense the location of the floating island. But now, with a flick of her sleeve, her red sleeves fluttered in the wind. In the next moment, the dazzling red figure turned into a ray of light and shot towards the clouds. At this moment, the great emperor cultivating in seclusion on the floating island was still unaware that a great disaster was about to befall him. Due to the severity of his injuries, he took a pill to regulate his breathing and cultivate, hoping to recover as soon as possible. However, they knew very well how much of their strength they had used up in the attack. It was no doubt wishful thinking to recover in such a short time. But apart from that, they had no other choice. On one hand, they had to be wary of Fingzhou. They were afraid that she would come looking for them. In the cave residence at the back mountain of the immortal mansion, the great emperor exhaled softly, frowned, and opened his eyes. He felt a little uneasy today, as if something unsettling was about to happen. He couldn't even calm down to cultivate and adjust his breath. What's going on? Could it be that something is going to happen? After all, he was an existence of this level. He would always have a sense of danger. It was this perception that allowed him to avoid danger most of the time. Regarding this, he had always firmly believed in this premonition of his. Just like now, when an inexplicable sense of panic appeared in his heart, he stopped cultivating and regulated his breathing. He opened his eyes and got off the ice bed. With his hands behind his back, he paced back and forth in the cave with a thoughtful and worried expression. Chapter 48-36. In the end, he walked out of the cave and headed towards the immortal palace. Master. Seeing him come out, a middle-aged man came forward in surprise and hurriedly asked, Master, did something happen? The Northern Flame Martial Emperor looked at him with a sullen expression and asked, This emperor wanted to ask you, is everything as per normal? Has the order to cut off Fingzhou's resources been completed? Rest assured, Master, everything has been arranged according to Master's orders, the middle-aged man respectfully said. Hearing this, his tightly knitted brows didn't loosen. Instead, he said, Take some people to patrol around. I feel a bit uneasy today, so it's better to be careful. Yes, the middle-aged man replied. The middle-aged man responded. However, just as his voice fell, there was a loud bang in the air. It was as if the barrier had been broken. As the loud sound spread, the air also fluctuated along with the airflow. Almost at the same time, the Northern Flame Martial Emperor's expression changed and became gloomy. Damn it. He cursed in a low voice and instinctively took a step back. His body was in a defensive posture as he vigilantly looked at the red figure that appeared in the sky after the barrier was broken. Fengzhou. He gritted his teeth as he called out that name. His eyes were filled with hatred. Even though he wanted to kill her 1,000 times, he knew that his injuries hadn't healed and he wasn't a match for Fengzhou. Hearing this, the middle-aged man's heart trembled and he looked at the red figure. He saw the red figure fly over with her hands behind her back. Her red clothes fluttered in the wind, her ink-black hair danced in the wind. Her peerless face was filled with coldness. He didn't have time to be shocked, he instinctively shouted, "Come! Face the enemy! Face the enemy!" His voice contained spirit force and a trace of panic as it echoed in the air. As soon as his voice rang out, dozens of cultivators dressed in tight robes quickly appeared, brandishing their long swords as they attacked the red figure. Unfortunately, the difference in strength between them and Fengzhou wasn't just a little bit. With Fengzhou's current strength, only the Northern Flame Grand Emperor who was similarly at the Emperor realm could fight her. The others couldn't even withstand a single blow from her. Fengzhou glanced at those people and waved her hand. At the same time, she shouted, "Scram!" A powerful and terrifying pressure that was visible to the naked eye came out of her sleeve and hit the dozens of cultivators like a wave. The powerful pressure was accompanied by the pressure of an ancient divine beast and her own strength. As soon as it came out, the dozens of cultivators screamed and were sent flying. They fell to the ground messily and spat out blood. They couldn't stand up for a long time. Seeing this, the middle-aged man's expression changed and he couldn't help but look at the Northern Flame Martial Emperor. He immediately said, "Master, you haven't recovered from your injuries yet. If you fight her, you will definitely be at a disadvantage. Why don't we avoid this crisis for now and wait until Master recovers? It won't be too late to deal with her then." The Northern Flame Martial Emperor knew that with only 30% of his strength left, he wasn't a match for Fengzhou. Seeing her powerful aura, he clenched his teeth and hatefully said, "Let's go." He turned and wanted to escape. Chapter 48-37. Do you think you can still run away? Fengzhou snorted coldly. Her red figure stood in the air as she formed an ancient seal with her hands. As her hands moved, visible streams of spiritual energy rapidly interweaved into a net. Inescapable net, set. With a clear shout, she pushed her hand forward, and a ray of light flew out. In an instant, the net on the ground and the net in the sky quickly connected, blocking the Northern Flame Emperor's escape route. Powerful streams of air interweaved into a net, and it quickly formed a huge net that blocked the way forward, trapping the Northern Flame Emperor. Seeing this scene, the Northern Flame Emperor turned around and stared at the red figure with a cold and sharp gaze. "Fengzhou, you better think carefully. If you really become enemies with this emperor today, it's not certain who will live and who will die." A cold and threatening voice sounded, and the aura of an expert burst forth at this moment. Even if he only had 30% of his strength left, he was unwilling to show any weakness. What a joke! Fengzhou sneered, and her cold eyes fell on the Northern Flame Emperor. She said, "From the moment you became enemies with me and tried to kill me, you and I have been on opposing sides. Do you think it's possible to stop now?" She stretched out her hand, and the Qingfeng sword, which glowed with a cold green light, appeared in her hand. She pointed the long sword downwards, and sword force shot out. She also released a powerful pressure from her body. "You're a great emperor, after all. How are you different from a mouse if you run away with your tail between your legs?" Her eyes were filled with contempt and disdain, and the contempt in her eyes completely infuriated the Northern Flame Emperor. "Impudent!" A furious roar rang out. When the great emperor was enraged, the aura in the air seemed to tremble. The middle-aged man beside him could not withstand the powerful pressure. He only felt the blood and qi in his body churning. In the next moment, he spat out a mouthful of blood. His entire body was on the verge of collapse as he knelt down. What an arrogant Fengzhou. Today, this emperor wants to see what you're capable of. The Northern Flame Emperor roared angrily. He couldn't calm the anger in his heart, and his breathing became rapid. Even if he only had 30% of his strength left, he was still a great emperor, and had always been a lofty existence. Since when did anyone dare to compare him with a lowly mouse that everyone despised? Fengzhou, a mere woman, dared to be so arrogant. Today, even if he had to use up all his cultivation, he had to teach her a lesson. He had to let her know how powerful he was. Then open your dog eyes wide and take a good look. Fengzhou snorted coldly. The next moment, the red figure turned into a flash of light and attacked him at the speed of light. The Qingfeng sword in his hand surged with a biting cold sword qi, revealing a terrifying murderous aura. You're courting death. Hearing her words, the Northern Flame Emperor felt a mouthful of blood rush up to his throat. He tasted blood in his mouth, but he forcefully swallowed it back down. Seeing Fengzhou's murderous aura rush over, he moved his hand, and a double-edged halberd appeared in his hand. As he swung it, there was a sharp whoosh. Clang! Chapter 48-38. Both of them released their powerful auras and auras, forming a protective shield to protect their bodies from the other's sword aura and saber aura. The two of them were only about 3 steps away from each other due to the clash of sword and halberd. Because of this, he could clearly feel the powerful aura released by Fengzhou. If he wasn't injured, he might have been able to put up a fight. But now, after a long battle, he would definitely lose. Thinking of this, he didn't show it on his face, but he was secretly anxious. He quickly thought of a way to deal with this. Fengzhou wouldn't give him the chance and time. Her sword was blocked by his halberd and couldn't pierce through. Both weapons were extraordinary, and the aura emitted from them was extremely sharp. Looking at the sweat on the Northern Flame Emperor's forehead, her eyes flashed and her lips curled into a faint smile. I didn't expect the great Northern Flame Emperor to be so weak. As soon as her mocking voice fell, the hand holding the green-edged sword instantly turned, and the long sword slid past the opponent's halberd. Then, with a sudden turn, the tip of the sword avoided the opponent's halberd, and with a speed that was too fast for the ears to cover, it pierced towards his throat. The Northern Flame Emperor was startled by the cold killing intent, and he quickly raised his halberd to block it. However, in the next instant, the sword that had been aimed at his throat, which he had blocked, suddenly changed direction and pierced into his shoulder. Hiss! Ah! The sharp blade pierced his shoulder, but it brought with it a searing pain that was as hot as a flame. The pain penetrated his mouth and seeped into his bones and blood. His hand that was holding the halberd couldn't help but tremble for a moment. When he couldn't react in time, he gave Feng-9 a chance to strike again. Whoosh! She pulled out her sword from her shoulder and slashed at his arm. Her speed was so fast that it was hard for anyone to react to it. When she pulled out her sword, a column of blood gushed out from the Northern Flame Emperor's shoulder. When the sword slashed down, a piece of flesh flew out along with it. In an instant, a scream of agony rang out. Ah! That scream echoed in the air. What came into view was the Northern Flame Great Emperor's pale and panicked face, his body covered in blood, and his trembling arm hanging by his side. At that moment, he only felt darkness in front of his eyes, and his mind went blank for a moment. The fierce murderous aura that hit him in the face made him quickly retreat without thinking. His figure jumped out of the sky more than 10 meters away, and only then did he gasp for breath. Large beads of sweat dripped from his forehead. He was like a fish that had been washed ashore by the waves and was on the verge of death. His mouth was wide open as he gasped for air. His heart was beating fast. Fear, terror, and shock occupied his entire heart. Fengzhou looked at him and curled her lips. She spoke in a clear voice that was neither fast nor slow. If it was an ordinary person, that move just now would have killed them on the spot. However, just as you said, you are a great emperor. If you can't even dodge that move, then wouldn't you be living up to your reputation? It's just that you won't be so lucky next time. At this moment, her voice sounded like the voice of the King of Hell in his ears. He hadn't recovered from his injuries yet. Even 30% of his strength couldn't support him in a long battle. Perhaps it was because he had fought with her before, but at this moment, the only thought in his mind was to run for his life. Chapter 48-39. Trying to escape. Fengzhou sneered. Looking at his expression, she knew that he was looking for a chance to escape. She sneered and glanced at the inescapable net that she had set up. I have modified this inescapable net. Even if there is a treasure that can escape, it will not be able to escape from this inescapable net. Today, you will not be able to escape from me. Hearing her words, the Northern Flame Emperor's heart sank. He had wanted to find a way to escape from this inescapable net. He did not expect her to discover his intentions. However, he did not believe that he would not be able to escape from this place. Red Tiger! Come out! He shouted. As soon as his voice fell, a flame flashed, and a majestic flying tiger with a pair of wings soared into the sky. The tiger roared, and the aura in the air shook for a moment. Roar! As the tiger roared, a strong air current spread. It flashed its claws and glared at Fengzhou. It flapped its wings and stared warily at Fengzhou. There was no other reason than the fact that it could feel the powerful aura of an ancient divine beast from this human woman's body. Even though it was a sacred beast, it was still no match for the might of an ancient sacred beast. Now that it had come out from the space, it did not dare to go forward. On the contrary, it took a step back in fear and let out a low howl. This human, it was afraid of her. Seeing his contracted beast take a step back after coming out, the Northern Flame Emperor felt very aggrieved. But he also knew that Fengzhou's contracted beast was the ancient mythical beast Fire Phoenix. His mythical beast was no match for it. Therefore, he didn't plan to let his contract beast come out to deal with Feng 9. Instead, he wanted it to find the weakest point of this inescapable net and break through it while he was barely holding on. That way, it would have a chance to escape. Go! Find the weakest point of the Heavenly Network's escape route. He roared and ordered his contracted beast to find a way to break the inescapable net. Even if it did not work, it should be able to weaken Fengzhou's inescapable net. At that time, even if he had to use up all his strength, he would definitely break through this damned inescapable net. Fengzhou glanced at the sacred beast, then looked at the Northern Flame Emperor. She didn't give him a chance to catch his breath, and attacked with her Qingfeng sword again. This time, a flame appeared on the blade of her Qingfeng sword. It was like a fire dragon was coiling around the Qingfeng sword. The two figures fought back and forth. Most of the time, it was Fengzhou who attacked while the other party dodged. Because the Northern Flame Great Emperor couldn't keep up with Fengzhou's speed, more and more wounds appeared on his body. His robe had long been dyed red with blood. Fengzhou didn't kill him directly with her sword either. Instead, she cut open his body with every strike, as if she wanted him to experience pain and die. Ah! He screamed as Fengzhou stabbed his thigh. He fell from the sky and landed heavily on the ground. He spat out a mouthful of blood. Fengzhou! If you want to kill me, just do it. Why do you have to cut me up? The Northern Flame Emperor stared at her furiously. There were countless wounds on his body. Every wound was pierced by the cold sword aura and burned by the fire. It was as if the fire was burning his bones and blood. He was in so much pain that he wished he was dead. Fengzhou slowly descended from the sky. She pointed her sword to the ground and looked at the Northern Flame Emperor. Her beautiful face revealed a cold and bloodthirsty smile. Chapter 48-40. The Northern Flame Emperor opened his mouth, but he could not say a word. When he had decided to take action against them, he had already expected this day to come. However, he did not expect this day to come so quickly. Furthermore, under such circumstances, he, a great emperor, had to suffer so much pain and torment. Regret? No. He only hated that he did not kill her when she was ascending. Instead, he gave her the chance to become an immortal and become his enemy. The winner takes all. There's no point in talking anymore. If you want to kill me, you can do whatever you want. I will not beg for mercy, he said hatefully as he stared at her. Even though he was covered in wounds, he still straightened his back. As a great emperor, his dignity did not allow him to admit defeat in front of her. Is that so? Then let's try. She turned the sword in her hand and a sharp sword aura shot out, chopping off his 4 limbs. Hiss! A shrill scream rang out, reaching the clouds and echoing in the sky. That sound caused the sacred beast to roar at Fengzhou and pounce towards Fengzhou. Humph! Fengzhou snorted coldly. With a wave of his sleeve, a force shot out and sent the sacred beast flying. Bang! The sacred beast was sent flying dozens of meters away before landing heavily on the ground. Blood flowed out of his mouth. He wanted to stand up, but his 4 limbs were too weak to stand up. He lay down again, panting heavily. Ah! Fengzhou! Fengzhou! Even if I die, I will drag you down with me. His voice was filled with hatred. Intense pain and hatred filled the Northern Flame Emperor's chest. His 4 limbs were sent flying, and blood flowed out like a fountain. The spiritual energy in his body rose rapidly, and his hair flew in a mess. He looked like a crazy demon, and his eyes were filled with blood as he cursed angrily. In the next moment, his body swelled up like a balloon. Even his face was swollen. A strong air current accompanied by an aura of death exploded at that moment. The air current was so strong that it rushed towards Fengzhou. Fengzhou was standing a few meters in front of him. He wanted to use his own strength to take her down with him. His speed was so fast that no one could avoid it. When the powerful aura exploded, Fengzhou immediately turned around and entered the space in an instant, avoiding the deathly aura that covered the sky. Faintly, she only heard a loud bang, followed by a rumbling sound. She couldn't hear anything else because she hid in the space. Almost at the same time that the Northern Flame Emperor self-detonated, the spiritual pressure in the air disappeared with his death. At that moment, the ground where his territory was located shook violently. Rocks rolled down, the river surged, and the waves rolled up. At that moment, almost all the sovereigns and immortals in this territory felt that something had happened. Fengzhou came out of the space after a while. When she saw that the entire island was destroyed by the Northern Flame Emperor's self-detonation, she could not help but raise her eyebrows. A trace of surprise flashed through her eyes. I didn't expect the power to be so strong. Fortunately, I hid in the space. Otherwise, I'm afraid that I wouldn't have been able to avoid this attack. They couldn't imagine, nor did they dare to imagine, that the powerful Northern Flame Great Emperor would be killed by someone. If he was truly killed by someone, how powerful would the person who killed him be? Originally, they were all rushing towards the Immortal Island, but now, they were hesitating and panicking. If they went there now, they would probably run into the person who had killed the Northern Flame Great Emperor. At this moment, even if they didn't want to admit it, they had to. Only the death of the Northern Flame Great Emperor would disperse the spiritual energy in this world. Chapter 48-42. Who do you think it is? An immortal elder asked bitterly. An immortal master beside him shook his head. I don't know. The Northern Flame Great Emperor is so powerful. How could he be killed? Who has the ability to kill him? Killing a great emperor. This is not a joke. Who dares to do it? An immortal elder stroked his beard and pondered. I went to the Phoenix Master's territory a few days ago. The spiritual power there is similar to ours. Hiss. How is that possible? The Phoenix Master just ascended not long ago. She is a woman. How could she kill the Northern Flame Great Emperor? I don't believe it. The immortal master beside him said. He didn't believe that the Phoenix Master who just ascended not long ago did it. It's useless to say more. No matter who the new Great Emperor is, we should go and visit him. What do you think? An immortal elder said and looked at the others. They nodded and said, yes, no matter who this person is, he will be the emperor of our territory in the future. No matter what, we have to pay him a visit. Moreover, not only have we sensed it, I believe the other immortal monarchs and immortal elders have sensed it as well. They will definitely pay him a visit. They looked at each other and said, if we don't go now, when are we going? Let's go. With that, they turned into a few streaks of light and flew up into the sky. At this moment, Fengjiu looked at the square immortal seal. She rearranged her spiritual power and it slowly fell back into her hand. She played with it for a while and put it into her space. Then, she looked at the immortal island. Everything on the immortal island had been destroyed. Even the mountains could be said to be flattened. With her current strength, it wasn't difficult for her to use an immortal technique to restore it. However, she was thinking about what to do with the immortal island. She had a large immortal island of her own. There was almost nothing on it. She naturally couldn't abandon her own immortal island and come here to live. It's too wasteful to leave it here. After all, this is a gift from the heavenly Tao. It's surrounded by immortal qi. It's not comparable to an ordinary place. She murmured softly. After thinking for a bit, she finally decided to move this immortal island to her immortal island and merge them together to expand her territory. Alright, let's do that. A look of satisfaction flashed across her eyes. Just as she was about to cast an immortal spell to restore this place, she sensed someone approaching. She closed her eyes and released her divine perception to scan the area. She saw that it wasn't just one or two people who had come. Instead, it was the immortal lords and immortal elders of this territory, as well as some experts from other places. Her eyes flashed slightly, and her red figure turned and soared into the air, standing with her hands behind her back. As soon as those immortal monarchs and immortal elders arrived outside the island, they noticed the red figure that stood in midair from afar. Practically all of them were stunned when they saw her, and their faces were covered in astonishment and shock. They couldn't even conceal it. When they came, they had already guessed who this person was. Even if someone said that it was the Phoenix Master who had just ascended not long ago, they did not really believe it in their hearts. However, at this moment, when they saw the red figure standing in the air and looking down at them from above, their hearts suddenly trembled. Shock and disbelief filled their hearts and minds. Chapter 48-43. Even though none of the immortal monarchs and immortal elders had seen the newly ascended Phoenix Master, they had heard that she was a woman, a peerlessly beautiful woman. Moreover, she liked to wear red. Anyone who saw her once would never forget her face for the rest of their lives. At this moment, even though they had never seen the Phoenix Master before, they knew that this person was undoubtedly the Phoenix Master when they saw the beautiful woman in red standing in the air. "Why are all of you here?" Fengzhou's voice was cold and powerful. It echoed in the air and clearly entered everyone's ears. It was also her cold voice that pulled them back from their shock and absent-mindedness. They quickly lowered their heads, not daring to look at her face. One of the immortal elders lifted his robe and knelt down in front of her. "We are here to pay our respects to the Phoenix Master. From today onwards, we will be the Phoenix Master's subjects. We will serve the Phoenix Master for the rest of our lives and listen to your orders." Once the immortal elder's voice was heard, everyone came back to their senses. Those who were still a little hesitant immediately knelt down and paid their respects when they saw the immortal elder kneeling down. "We are here to pay our respects to the Phoenix Master. From today onwards, we will be the Phoenix Master's subjects. We will serve the Phoenix Master for the rest of our lives and listen to your orders." No matter what they were thinking or how shocked they were, at this moment, the Northern Flame Emperor had fallen. The Phoenix Master was in charge of their world and was their leader. They had no choice but to submit to her. Even though she was just a woman, in front of her strength and status, they had to kneel down in front of her respectfully. They were not allowed to be impudent or disrespectful. Everyone's voices were filled with spiritual energy. They gathered together and resounded in the air forcefully. Fengzhou, who was standing in the air, looked down at the people who were kneeling down in front of her. Countless powerful people were kneeling down in front of her, treating her as their leader. At this moment, she was still as calm as usual. She was not excited or happy at all. It was as if all of this was a matter of course. All of this was something that they had already gotten used to. Everyone knelt with their heads lowered and pressed against their palms. There was no sound from above telling them to get up. At this moment, they didn't dare to raise their heads or stand up. They didn't even dare to show the slightest bit of dissatisfaction. This was because they knew that the disparity in strength was too great. If the Phoenix Master wanted to kill them, even if they were celestial dukes with extraordinary statuses, she would still be able to take their lives with a flick of her finger. Another thing was that these people had just acted on the orders of the Northern Flame Emperor a few days ago to cut off the resources of the Phoenix Master's territory. If she were to blame them, they would probably, thinking of this, cold sweat seeped out from the foreheads of those kneeling on the ground, dripping onto the sailors. They only felt a chill run through their bodies, their hearts beating up and down in fear. Fengzhou wanted to dampen their spirits, so she allowed them to continue kneeling and maintaining that posture. After a long while, she finally opened her mouth to speak. "I won't pursue your past, but from this moment on, if anyone dares to go against me, they will end up like the Northern Flame Emperor, who died without a corpse." Chapter 48-44. The Northern Flame Martial Emperor was indeed dead. He had indeed died at the hands of the Phoenix Master. Even though they had guessed it, they could not help but feel shocked when they heard the words coming out of her mouth. "Yes, we won't dare to be disloyal," everyone hurriedly replied. "Rise," Fengzhou said. Her gaze landed on the immortal old man who had knelt down earlier. She asked, "Sort out everyone's information and send it to my deity island when the time comes. This old man is immortal old man Qinghua. I will obey the Phoenix Master's orders." The old man was pleasantly surprised. He hurriedly cupped his fists together and reported his name. "You can all leave now," Fengzhou said as she glanced at everyone. Everyone responded and saluted before dispersing. Fengzhou watched them leave, and she only looked at the ruins of the island after they vanished from her field of vision. In the next moment, she condensed her immortal energy and flicked her sleeve, causing numerous exquisite and gorgeous immortal abodes to appear once more below her. The Azure Emperor had sensed the death of the Northern Flame Martial Emperor on Cloud Sky Mountain. He walked out of his residence and looked at the sky in the distance with his hands behind his back. A hint of surprise flashed across his eyes. I didn't expect Fingzhou to kill the Northern Flame Martial Emperor. It seems like they were seriously injured by the attack back then. If it was not for Fingzhou's attack when she ascended, even if Fingzhou was at her peak, she would not have been able to kill the Northern Flame Martial Emperor so easily. However, she was able to kill the Northern Flame Martial Emperor now. It could only mean that the attack back then had seriously injured the 4 Martial Emperors. Once the news of the Northern Flame Martial Emperor's death spread, the other 3 should be afraid, he said softly and shook his head with a chuckle. They were already Martial Emperors. Why couldn't they have offended anyone? Why did they have to offend Fingzhou? What else could it be if they were not tired of living? At the same time, when Mo Qin sensed the disturbance in the immortal abode, he walked out to take a look. He shook his head and smiled helplessly. I thought you said you wouldn't touch those people for now. Who would have thought that only a few days have passed? You've already killed one. He was well aware of Fingzhou's strength. Coupled with her vengeful nature, it was only a matter of time before the 4 great emperors died and became enemies with Fingzhou. Now that one of them had died, not only would the other 3 be fearful, but everyone would also be alarmed, especially those great emperors who were in seclusion. No matter how much they did not care about worldly affairs, they would probably hear of Fingzhou's name after this incident. Mo Chen's guess was right. Not only did the 3 great emperors who were recuperating in seclusion find out about the death of the Northern Flame Great Emperor, even the other great emperors in seclusion were alarmed by the death and replacement of the great emperor. All of them sent out people to inquire about Fengzhou. In comparison, Fingzhou was busy rearranging the celestial island she had just conquered. Once she was done, she would bring the floating celestial island back to her celestial island and merge the 2 celestial islands into one. Songmi, who had waited at the inn for 3 days, saw that Fingzhou still hadn't returned. She couldn't help but glance at the little beast sleeping on the chair out of boredom. Because she'd said something wrong the other day, the little beast didn't pay much attention to her. Even when she tried to pet it, it brushed her hand away. Chapter 48-45. She stood up and looked at it with a smile. It's been a few days since I've moved around. Let's go out and buy groceries. I'll make you a good meal when we get back. How about that? Tun Yun glanced at her. It couldn't deny that this person was good at cooking. It had just tasted her cooking 2 days ago and it was really good. So he straightened up, jumped down, and followed her. I didn't expect that. You're also a glutton. No wonder you're so fat. She smiled and couldn't help but want to touch Tun Yun's soft body. Tun Yun glanced at her with disdain and moved away. Songmi didn't care. She opened the door and let it out, heading straight for the market. Other girls liked to shop in jewelry stores, like looking at beautiful clothes and small trinkets. However, she liked to shop in the market and buy all kinds of kitchen knives. Fresh spirit mushrooms, fresh spirit mushrooms. Madam, look at these spirit mushrooms. They're all picked not long ago and they're still very fresh. A man was hawking in the alley, shouting to the passers-by. 1 person and 1 beast walked in the market. Songmi looked around. When she heard someone shouting for spirit mushrooms, she casually glanced over and saw some matsutake on a piece of cloth on the ground in the alley. Her eyes couldn't help but light up. These are freshly picked. She squatted down and picked one up to take a look. She sniffed it and revealed a happy smile. It even has the smell of soil. When the man saw that someone had come to ask about it, he quickly smiled and said, Miss, buy some spirit mushrooms to make soup and cook. These are all very fresh. They're freshly picked not long ago and they're very fresh. And the price isn't expensive. How much is this? Songmi asked. 10 gold coins per caddy. If you buy more, I'll give you a discount. How about it? The man looked at her and asked. When she heard the price, Songmi couldn't help but widen her eyes. She looked at him in astonishment, 10 gold coins per caddy. Seeing her expression, the man thought that she thought it was too expensive, so he hurriedly said, Miss, the taste of this spirit mushroom is very fresh. It's different from ordinary spirit mushrooms, and it's very difficult to find. How about this? If you think it's expensive, I'll charge you 8 gold coins per caddy. Buy a caddy and try it. If you think it's delicious, then come back and buy it from me. Good, straightforward. Pack them all up, I want them all. Her eyes lit up as she waved her hand and stared at the spirit mushrooms in the man's mouth. This was actually an extremely precious spirit pine mushroom. She had once eaten the dishes her father made with this spirit pine mushroom at home. She still remembered it to this day. However, this thing was very difficult to find and very few people knew about it. Even if they encountered it, they would only treat it as an ordinary mushroom. Hearing this, the man was delighted and hurriedly said, Good, good, good. I just happen to have 10.5 jeans left. Take it as 10 jeans and I'll give it all to you. Songmi straightforwardly took out the money and directly gave him 200 gold coins. She asked, Big brother, keep this money well. By the way, I want to ask, where did you pick these spirit mushrooms? When the man saw that she gave so much, he paused for a moment before saying, I picked them in Hualien Mountain. There's a mix of Huashan pine and oak trees there. Thank you, big brother. Songmi smiled and thanked him. Just as she was about to take the spirit mushrooms, she heard a voice. Chapter 48-46. At the same time, a pair of big hands suddenly came forward and snatched the bag of things that had been wrapped up. Seeing that the thing she bought was snatched away, Songmi immediately rushed forward to snatch it back. However, the middle-aged man holding the bag quickly retreated. At the same time, he opened the bag and revealed a pleasantly surprised smile. It really is this thing. He took out a money bag and threw it to the man. I'll buy this thing. The man was stunned. He looked at the money bag in front of him, then looked at Songmi, then said apologetically to the middle-aged man, Sir, the spirit mushroom has been sold to this lady. Is that so? Then this money is mine. The middle-aged man looked at Songmi and turned to leave with the bag. Give it back to me. Songmi was furious. She took out a kitchen knife from somewhere and slashed forward. A sharp wind came from behind. The middle-aged man was shocked and instinctively dodged. He saw the kitchen knife fly past him and stabbed into the ground in front of him. Give it back to me. Otherwise, don't even think about leaving. Songmi shouted and went forward to grab the bag in the middle-aged man's hand. You dare to snatch something from me? You're courting death. The middle-aged man snorted and retreated. At the same time, 2 men in black clothes came out from the shadows and blocked Songmi's attack. You actually have helpers. Songmi gritted her teeth and took out her weapon. Am I seeing things? That girl took out a frying pan for cooking. That frying pan can be used as a weapon. Seeing the fight, the onlookers not far away couldn't help but widen their eyes in shock. They stared at the frying pan that was similar to the one on their stove. Why is that lady snatching something from Fragrant Taste House's Chef Wei? Chef Wei is from the Wei family. Who here doesn't know him? Not giving him some face. It's just some spirit mushrooms. It's not like it's a big deal. Is it worth offending Chef Wei? Don't run. Give it back to me. Songmi shouted. Seeing the middle-aged man take her spirit mushroom and turn to leave, she couldn't help but panic. Tun Yun, who was ignored because he was a small pet, glanced at Song Mir. Seeing that she wasn't at a disadvantage, he passed by and followed the middle-aged man. At this time, the middle-aged man was walking back. He was happy because he got something good. He didn't know that a small pet, no, a miniature sacred beast was following behind him. Tun Yun wasn't in a hurry to make a move. He followed him and watched as he turned left and right into an alley. Then, he suddenly pounced from behind and kicked with his two hind legs. "Ah!" The middle-aged man cried out in alarm. His entire body was sent flying by a huge force. At the same time, the bag in his hand was instantly snatched away. His entire body flew forward and crashed into the wall of the alley. His head was broken and bleeding. When he wiped off the blood on his forehead and looked back while gasping for breath, not to mention a person, there was not even a shadow of a ghost in the alley. Even the bag of spiritual Matsutake had disappeared. Who was it? He gritted his teeth and roared angrily. Using the wall as support, he stood up and chased after them. He looked around but didn't know where to start. Chapter 48-47. Look at that little pet. Not only is it adorable, it's even holding a big bag in its mouth, a man said as he looked at the meaty little pet curiously. What an adorable little pet. Where did you buy it from? I really want to raise one. A young girl found it adorable and couldn't help but keep her eyes glued to the adorable little pet. Looking at the way its butt swayed as it walked, her eyes couldn't help but sparkle. She tugged at the young man beside her and said, Big brother, I want a pet like that too. It's so adorable. I don't know what breed that little pet is. It's very rare. It's probably the cub of some spiritual beast. The young man said thoughtfully. He also stared at the little beast swaying its butt as it jogged. He felt that such a little beast was very rare. Big brother, let's go see who this little pet is. The young girl said as she pulled her brother and ran forward. At this moment, the middle-aged man behind them had already caught up. Because when he asked around, someone said that they saw a cute little beast holding a bag in its mouth running in their direction. Naturally, he came looking for it. On the other side, Song Mir twirled the frying pan in her hand. The frying pan in her hand instantly expanded several times and she slammed it towards the two men in black. Scram! With a furious roar, she swung the frying pan with both hands, sending the two people flying with the bottom of the frying pan. Ah! Two blood-curdling screams rang out as the two men in black were sent flying dozens of meters away. They landed heavily on the street. When the surrounding people saw this scene, they all stared with their eyes wide open. They looked at the angry and pretty little girl. If they didn't see it with their own eyes, they wouldn't dare to believe that the two big men were actually slapped dozens of meters away by the bottom of her pot. Furthermore, that ordinary-looking frying pan could actually change in size. It looked like it was a treasure. Not far away, Tun Yun, who was returning with the bag in his mouth, happened to see Song Mir send the two men flying dozens of meters away with a single slap of the frying pan. The corner of his mouth twitched involuntarily. Master probably wouldn't have thought that such a pretty little girl would have the strength of an ox. Ah! Tun Yun. You helped me get it back. Song Mir, who was still fuming a moment ago, saw the little snow-white pet standing not far away with the bag of spirit pine mushrooms in its mouth. Her eyes immediately lit up and a surprised smile appeared on her face. She hurriedly ran over with the frying pan and took the bag from its mouth. Opening it, it was indeed the thing she bought earlier. She immediately put it into her space to prevent it from being stolen again. You've done a great job today. I'll give you an extra drumstick when we get back. Songmir, Songmir, the middle-aged man who appeared before her and hurriedly said, Tun Yun. That old bastard is here again. Before Tun Yun could react, she had already picked him up and started running. He could not help but roll his eyes like a human. Stop right there. Human. Chapter 48. This city was where the aristocratic families resided. News of what had happened here quickly reached the ears of some of the families. In particular, the Wei clan had sent men to capture Song Er. After all, this was the Wei clan's territory. If they were bullied by outsiders, how could they maintain their foothold in this city? On the other side, those men had gone to capture Song Er. At the city gates, Fengzhou, dressed in red, strode in. She hadn't expected the matter to be resolved so smoothly. After all, she'd only gone to the Northern Flame Emperor to try her luck. Even if he wasn't there, she'd still wanted to destroy his lair. She hadn't expected that the Northern Flame Emperor hadn't gone somewhere else to recuperate. Instead, he'd stayed on the Immortal Island. After dealing with a formidable opponent, she felt inexplicably relaxed and happy. As for the remaining three, there was no rush. She would take it one step at a time. It was only a matter of time before she dealt with them. Feng Zhou walked down the street and arrived at the inn. Just as she was about to enter, the innkeeper of the inn came out to greet her anxiously. Young miss, you're finally back. Feng Zhou raised an eyebrow. What's wrong? Did something happen? The young lady who came with you is in big trouble. I heard from the guests in the inn that the young lady somehow offended the Wei clan. She's now being surrounded by the Wei clan at the western main street. I heard that the Wei clan's people threatened to break that young lady's legs and even said that they would stew that little pet to eat. Hearing this, Fengzhou's lips curled into a smile. I see. Thank you for telling me. She nodded at him. Which way is the closest to the western main street? Go straight down this street, then turn left. Go straight for another 200 meters and then turn right. The innkeeper said, then looked at her with some hesitation. Young miss, you're not thinking of going alone, are you? If you go alone, remember not to clash with the Wei clan again. I know. Innkeeper, tell the waiter to prepare some water for me to take a bath. We'll be back in a while. Fengzhou chuckled and walked towards the street the shopkeeper had pointed out. When the shopkeeper saw this, he paused for a moment before shouting, Waiter, quickly boil some water and bring it to the innermost guest room on the second floor. Judging from the aura of this red-clothed woman, she should have an extraordinary background. Perhaps nothing bad would happen to her. On West Street, Song Er hugged Tun Yun and looked at the people surrounding her. She frowned and said, How dare you? What are you trying to do in broad daylight? Humph. Stupid girl. I think you won't shed tears until you see the coffin. The middle-aged man snorted coldly and stared at Song Mir, waving his hand. Capture her. Come and try it. Song Mir glared. She waved her hand and the frying pan appeared in her hand again. When the middle-aged man saw the frying pan in her hand, he recalled the scene from before, and his eyes burned with passion. Capture her. Capture her for me. The frying pan that could change its size should be an immortal artifact. It could be used to cook food and also as a weapon for self-defense. Such a treasure was very suitable for a chef like him. Chapter 48-49. Although her strange attacks were quite lethal, it was difficult for two fists to fight against four hands. If she really couldn't handle it, it would help her. Those people rushed forward, and Song Mir also went forward with the frying pan. Although she was petite, her strength was not small, and her battle prowess was not to be underestimated. Especially with the frying pan in her hand, those guards had to back off. When Feng Zhou arrived at West Street, she saw that there were many people around. Seeing that she couldn't squeeze in, she went to the second floor of a tea house facing the street and sat down. She also ordered a pot of tea to drink. When Feng Zhou came near, Tun Yun sensed her presence. Looking around, it saw the owner sitting on the second floor of the tea house, leaning against the railing and looking down. Feng Zhou looked at Tun Yun, smiled, and gave it a look. Seeing this, Tun Yun squatted by the side and watched as Song Mi-er dealt with the dozen or so guards by herself. He was surprised to see this. He thought that she wouldn't be able to deal with so many guards alone, but who would have thought that it would be more than enough? On the second floor, Feng Zhou was drinking tea as she watched the fight below. When she saw that Song Mi-er's attacks were all in the style of cooking, she could not help but laugh. She did not know that there was such a cultivation technique. And looking at her technique, it was not just a little bit of perfection. The way she saw it, Song Mi-er was not treating them as opponents at all, but as a dish to be stir-fried. She did not know how she trained, but her skills were not bad. 11 people were not a match for her. She took a sip of tea, and saw the middle-aged man's hand move slightly. Something seemed to slip through his sleeve, and in the next moment, a hidden weapon flew towards Song Mi-er. Feng Zhou flicked her hand, and a stream of air swept past, shooting down the hidden weapon that was flying towards Song Mi-er. At the same time, she waved her hand, and a few drops of tea flew out, instantly freezing into ice and attacking the middle-aged man's limbs. Hiss! With a blood-curdling scream, the middle-aged man's body convulsed for a moment before collapsing to the ground. His lips trembled slightly as cold air emitted from his body. Not long after, his face was covered with frost, and even his eyebrows were frozen into ice. Master Wei. When the guards who were knocked down saw the state of the middle-aged man, they were shocked and hurried to his side to help him up. Quick! Send Master Wei back. The guards shouted anxiously. They could not be bothered to continue fighting, and hurriedly carried him back to the Wei residence. Humph! Do you think I'm a pushover? How dare you bully me? Have you asked for my frying pan? Song Mi-er harumphed coldly as she raised her chin with a smug smile on her face. At the same time, she swung the lethal frying pan in her hand. Tun Yun walked up to her. Paw, 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 what's wrong? Song Mi-er asked, looking down at the chubby pet at her feet. Tun Yun glanced at the second floor of the tea house and ran up there. Song Mi-er raised her head and saw the red-robed Feng Zhou sitting on the second floor. She held a cup of tea and smiled at her. Song Mi-er couldn't help but call out in surprise. Sister, you're back. She happily followed Tun Yun to the second floor, and sat down at a table on the second floor. She looked at Feng Zhou. Sister, when did you come back? Why are you here? Chapter 48-50. Those people want to steal my things. I bought something good when I went to the market today. Sis, you just came back and didn't eat. How about I make something good for you? Song Mi-er said with a smile. Hearing her change from Sister Feng to elder sister, and now directly calling her elder sister, Feng Zhou just smiled and looked at her, saying, all right. I haven't eaten for the past few days. She smiled and asked again, what good things did you buy? Let those people remember. This, elder sister, do you know what this is? Song Mi-er mysteriously took out the spirit pine mushroom and showed it to Feng Zhou. Seeing that thing, Feng Zhou raised her eyebrows and said with a smile, so it's this. I've eaten it before, it's a pine mushroom. No matter how good this thing was, It wasn't something rare or precious to her, but seeing her treasured look, she couldn't help but find it funny. "This is not easy to find, I bought it at the market, it's delicious to use for cooking and stewing. Also, there's a very pure spirit energy in it, eating it is very nourishing." Song-mi said and kept the thing. Feng-jo smiled. She took a sip of tea and asked, why do I see that all your moves are for stir-frying? Could it be that this is a martial skill passed down in your family? Elder sister, you're really smart. She gave Feng-jo a thumbs up and said with a smile, "Isn't my family a cook? Our family is a family of culinary cultivators. What we cultivate is naturally our family's unique martial skill. Don't think that it's all for cooking, it's actually not. It's been modified, it's not a problem to deal with 10 people. Where did you get that frying pan? I think it's an extraordinary treasure." Feng-jo drank her tea and looked at her with a leisurely expression. "That was used by my father in the past, then he passed it down to me. I heard that it was refined by a very powerful armament master a long time ago, there's only one of it. My brothers don't have it, so my father left it to me." Speaking of this, she couldn't help but smile happily. She felt that her father doted on her the most. Hearing this, Feng-jo nodded and said, "If there's a chance, I really want to meet your family. They should be very powerful people." Hearing this, Song-mi-er's eyes lit up and said, "Elder sister, when I go home, you come with me. Stay at my house for a period of time, I guarantee that you'll eat good food every day. If you come to my house, my family will be very happy." "Alright, when I have the chance in the future, I will definitely go." She smiled and said, "Let's go. Let's go back to the inn." Thus, they headed to the inn first. "Okay," Feng-jo replied and nodded at him. "I'll cook for you in the kitchen." Song-mi said and ran to the kitchen without waiting for her response. She couldn't wait to cook the new ingredients she had obtained. Feng-jo shook her head and smiled as she went upstairs to take a bath. Tan-yun, on the other hand, had him stand guard outside the room. "Wei family. Who dares to oppose my Wei family? Have you found out?" On the main seat, a middle-aged man gloomily stared at the people kneeling below. Chapter 48-51. Hearing this, the middle-aged man's face sank even more. He stood up with his hands behind his back and walked a few steps in the hall. Then, he ordered, "Go, ask the 2 consecrators to make a trip there and bring him back." "Yes." The guard hurriedly replied. If the consecrators of the residence went to capture the girl, they would definitely be able to capture the girl. After all, anyone who could become a consecrator of an aristocratic residence had to be extraordinary. To the aristocratic families in the city, this was just a trivial matter. They naturally wouldn't take it to heart. Furthermore, they weren't the ones who had lost face, but the Wei clan. Naturally, they would just treat it as a show and watch. The 2 consecrators of the Wei clan were displeased when they heard the order from the head of the household. In any case, they were consecrators and possessed extraordinary strength. If they were asked to deal with some stronger powerhouses or deal with some more difficult matters, it would still be acceptable. But now, they were asked to capture a little girl. Even though they were displeased, they didn't dare to say anything. After all, the person who gave the order was the head of the household. They were consecrators of the Wei clan, so it was only right for them to do something for them. Thus, the 2 consecrators followed the guard and walked on the road. One of them even muttered, "It's just a little girl. I didn't expect that we would have to deal with her personally. Since it's the head of the household's order, we'll just do as he says. The sooner we capture her, the sooner we can report back to the head of the household." The other person said as he walked at a steady pace. "Have you heard? The Northern Flame Emperor is dead. Now that the Phoenix Master has taken over our residence, the news has spread secretly. I believe that it won't be long before everyone knows about it. One of them said in a low voice. I just heard about it this morning. Some of the people in charge of the family also know about it, but it hasn't spread outside yet. Speaking of which, the Phoenix Master has just ascended not long ago. The Northern Flame Emperor has been famous for a long time and is so powerful. I didn't expect. The person sighed and shook his head. You're not the only one who didn't expect it. No one expected it at all. Not long ago, the Northern Flame Emperor gave the order to cut off all resources. How long has it been since then? Now, all the aristocratic families are worried that the Phoenix Master will make things difficult for them. The two of them chatted in a low voice until the person leading the way stopped in his tracks. Consecrators, we found out that she's in this inn. The guard said and took a step back. At this time, Feng Zhou, who had just finished bathing, was taking a nap in her room. After all, she had been dealing with matters for the past few days and did not have time to rest. Now that she had taken a bath, she was relaxed and sleepy. Tun Yun was squatting outside the room. It was a small, chubby, and snow-white creature. As it squatted in front of the door, the people going up and down the stairs couldn't help but look at the snow-white pet squatting in front of the door. Song Mi-er was still busy in the kitchen and had no idea that the Wei family had come looking for her again of the E. Chapter 48-52. They had originally wanted to watch the show, but her second uncle had sent people to bring them back. She had pestered her second uncle so much that he had agreed to bring her out. However, the middle-aged man who was being dragged by the girl saw the people in front of the inn. He frowned and stopped in his tracks. Second uncle. The girl called out. She followed his gaze and saw the people in front of the inn. She couldn't help but whisper disdainfully, Second uncle, these are the people from the Wei family. I don't think they have much character. They specialize in bullying others. Don't get involved in this. Go over there and have some tea. The middle-aged man saw this and led them to a nearby tea house. Do you have a woman with a little white pet staying here? Call her out, one of the consecrators said to the shopkeeper who came up to greet them. The shopkeeper's smile froze when he heard that. Well, please wait a moment. With that, he hurriedly walked into the kitchen. Song Mi-er was cooking in a good mood. Just as she was cooking, she heard a knock on the kitchen door. Young lady, the people from the Wei family are here. Young lady, come out quickly. As she didn't like to be disturbed while she was cooking, she had paid the shopkeeper enough. She was the only one in the kitchen at the moment. In addition, she had closed the kitchen door, so the shopkeeper couldn't enter the kitchen even if he wanted to. He could only shout from outside. I'm not free right now. Tell them to come later if they want to fight. Song Mi-er shouted, thinking about the matter at hand. Tun Yun, who was coming down the stairs, rolled her eyes when she heard the words coming from the kitchen. This person was really stupid. Did they have to wait for your time to find trouble with you? Sigh, great aunt, you better come out. The two consecrators from the Wei family are here. They won't be so easily dismissed, the shopkeeper shouted anxiously. All right, don't disturb her. Let her cook properly, Tun Yun said and came down the stairs. The shopkeeper was stunned when he heard the voice. He turned around and looked around. Who is it? Who's talking? The waiter beside him pulled at the corner of the shopkeeper's clothes with a pale face. The shopkeeper slapped the waiter's hand away and snapped, If you have something to say, then say it. Why are you tugging at my clothes? What happened to the rules you learned? The waiter swallowed his saliva and retracted his hand. He said in a trembling voice, "Shopkeeper, it's the pet that's talking." He pointed at the white pet that was walking down the stairs. He was shocked. A talking pet? What kind of rank was that? The shopkeeper looked at the stairs and saw the little pet glancing at them. Then, it walked out of the shop. "Are you sure? Is it really speaking?" The shopkeeper's expression changed, and he couldn't help but confirm again. "Yes, you didn't hear wrong. It's talking." Little Fool nodded heavily. The shopkeeper was stunned and murmured, I misjudged. I didn't expect this." As he spoke, he hurriedly regained his senses and caught up. When he quickly arrived at the entrance of the inn, he cupped his hands towards the two consecrators and said embarrassedly, "The two of you, that young lady said she's cooking. Do you think it's possible for you to come back later?" Hearing this, the faces of the two consecrators sank, and they immediately shouted, "Ask her to come out immediately. Otherwise, don't blame us for being impolite." Chapter 48-53. Who is it? Come out if you have the guts. The two worshippers looked around, trying to find the source of the voice. The shopkeeper glanced at the small, unremarkable snow-white pet beside him and silently took a step back. "Open your dog eyes and take a good look." Tun Yun's voice rang out again. It still appeared in front of everyone in its small and adorable form. However, it raised its head and puffed out its chest. The way it looked at the two worshippers from the corner of its eyes was filled with the aura of a powerful cultivator. It was completely at odds with its small figure and adorable appearance. When they saw that the voice had come from the little pet in front of them, the two worshippers' expressions changed. They involuntarily retreated and stared at it cautiously. "What are you?" "What?" Tun Yun's eyes turned cold. A bloodthirsty murderous intent flashed across its eyes. It released a strand of pressure towards the two worshippers. At the same time, it leaped and raised its sharp claws, attacking the two worshippers. Swish! In that instant, the two worshippers felt a terrifying pressure coming towards them. Their bodies instantly stiffened. In the next moment, a white shadow flashed past their eyes and an intense pain spread from their chests. "Ah!" The two of them cried out in pain as their figures retreated. At the same time, they looked down and saw that their chests had been scratched by the sharp claws. Their robes were torn apart, and on their chests, several deep claw marks were reflected in their eyes. The two worshippers were shocked and retreated again. They did not even have the time to counterattack. After retreating a few meters, they looked at the little white beast and met its bloodthirsty gaze. In that instant, they felt an overwhelming sense of danger spread through their hearts. The fear that came from the bottom of their hearts caused their faces to turn deathly pale. A chill rose from the soles of their feet and reached their hearts. It was so cold that they trembled violently. At the same time, they quickly reacted. "Go! Go quickly!" Their panicked voices were filled with unconcealable fear. They left as if they were running away. The onlookers were stunned. Tun Yun glanced at the person who had escaped and did not chase after him. Instead, it turned around and walked back inside. It returned to the room on the second floor and squatted in front of it. The shopkeeper wiped his cold sweat and pressed his palpitating heart with one hand. He was so scared that he couldn't recover for a long time. No matter how big the inn was, at this moment, it was so quiet that even the sound of a pin dropping could be heard. None of them dared to make a sound until they saw that snow-white little critter went to the second floor. Only then did they let out a sigh of relief. However, they also didn't dare to make a sound. Song Mir, who was in the kitchen, had no idea what was happening outside. At this moment, she was humming a tune as she cooked. Smelling the aroma of the food, she revealed a satisfied smile. In the tea house diagonally opposite the inn, the middle-aged man was seated with the young man and young woman. At this moment, the young man and young woman had astonished expressions on their faces while the middle-aged man had a contemplative expression on his face. "Are you talking about that snow-white little beast?" The middle-aged man looked at the two of them and asked. The two gulped and nodded. The girl said, "Yes, it's that little pet." Then she couldn't help but ask, "Second uncle, why can that little pet talk? Why did the Wei clan run away in fear? That little pet." Chapter 48-54. He looked at the inn diagonally opposite and said, "I wonder what kind of person owns a divine beast." When they returned to the Wei residence, the two consecrated elders explained what had happened in the hall. Finally, one of them said, "Master, that was definitely a divine beast." "We really? Divine beast?" Master Wei narrowed his eyes and said, "Didn't you say that it was just a little girl? Why was there a divine beast following her? Are you sure you didn't see wrongly?" "We can't be wrong." The pressure at that moment was very frightening. "We feel that the beast was at least a divine beast." This was a conservative guess. They even felt that it wasn't just a divine beast for a moment. However, they didn't dare to say it out loud. After all, divine beasts were too rare. Master Wei probably wouldn't believe them even if they said it out loud. He might even think that they were making excuses because they couldn't defeat the other party. Master Wei stood up and walked a few steps in the hall with his hands behind his back. He glanced at the two consecrated elders and saw that their wounds hadn't been bandaged. He said, "Go back and bandage your wounds. You don't have to worry about this." "Yes." The two consecrated elders didn't say anything else and left. Master Wei thought for a moment, then called for the steward and left after giving him some instructions. He was going to take a look personally to see if it was really a divine beast. Fengjiu felt much better after a nap. She tidied up, put on her outer clothes and walked out. When she opened the door, she saw Tun Yun squatting at the door. "Where's me, Fengjiu asked. She walked to the railing and looked downstairs. She saw that there were many people sitting on the first floor, but they were all quiet and didn't dare to speak loudly. When she walked out, those people looked up at her and sized her up. "She's cooking in the kitchen," Tun Yun said. "Did something happen? Why is the atmosphere so strange?" She had only taken a short nap. Why was the atmosphere in the inn so strange when she woke up? Tun Yun glanced down and said, "Those fellows from the Wei clan came looking for trouble while Master was asleep. I dealt with them, and then this happened." Hearing this, Fengjiu was startled, then smiled and did not say anything. Instead, he walked to a table on the second floor near the window. As soon as he sat down, the waiter quickly served him tea. The kitchen door opened and a fragrant aroma drifted out, attracting the attention of the people on the first floor. Song Mir walked out and took off her apron while looking up at the second floor. Just as she was about to go upstairs to see if Fengjiu was awake, the manager walked over. "Miss, that young lady has woken up. She's sitting at the table by the window on the second floor." "Awake? Then I'll have to trouble you to ask the waiter to bring the dishes to the second floor," Song Mir said with a smile. Okay. As he spoke, he quickly called for the waiter to serve the dishes. Song Mir returned to the kitchen and brought the bowl upstairs. She put it down on the table and smiled. "Sister, you woke up at the right time. This soup has been simmering for quite some time and the smell is very strong. Come and try it." Fengjiu saw that her face was red from busying herself in the kitchen, but she still looked very energetic. He smiled and said, "You should sit down and rest too." As he spoke, he poured her a cup of tea. Chapter 48-55. The shopkeeper and the waiter personally brought the dishes from the kitchen to the second floor before retreating. Looking at the exquisite dishes in front of her, Fingzhou's smile deepened. "I haven't eaten yet, but one look at the appearance and my appetite has been greatly whetted." "Sister, eat more if you like it." She helped Fingzhou with some dishes as she explained the ingredients used to stir-fry the dishes. Fingzhou ate as she listened. She ate the delicacies, drank the soup, and occasionally took a few sips of wine. The taste was not just average. After eating until she was a little full, she put down her chopsticks and said to Song Mir, "I'll take you to the weapon refinement master tomorrow. When the time comes, tell him what kind of kitchen knife you want and let him refine it for you." "All right." Song Mir was overjoyed and smiled happily. She was not stupid. After following by her side for the past few days, she naturally knew that Fingzhou was very powerful. Although she had never seen her in action, she had a feeling that the more time she spent with her, the stronger this feeling became. In addition, she was also very beautiful. Looking at her peerlessly beautiful face all day long, her mood was also extremely good. This was also one of the reasons why she was willing to follow her for so many days, but never mentioned looking for the weapon refiner to ask for a kitchen knife. She believed that she would definitely do what she had promised her. Therefore, during these days by her side, she only needed to focus on cooking. "Sister, you've been gone for so many days. Have you finished everything?" Song Mir asked. It's done," Fingzhou replied. She took a sip of wine and gently tapped the table with one hand. Her gaze fell upon the people who were walking towards them from not too far away. There were a few people with extraordinary cultivation behind them. She was dressed in luxurious robes and her steps were steady and exuded an oppressive aura. She had the aura of a superior and one could tell at a glance that she did not fit in with the people around her. Song Mir followed her gaze and saw that among the people walking towards them on the street, one of them was the person who had fought with her before. She said in surprise, "They're really here again. When I was cooking earlier, I heard from the shopkeeper that the people from the Wei family had come looking for you again. I told them to come later. I didn't think that they would really come." By the side, Tun Yun rolled his eyes. It was already unknown how many batches this was. Did they still think that it was the same batch as before? It didn't care so much. Instead, it squatted down like a human and used its claws to pick up the bowl and drink the soup. This soup was really delicious, and it was full of spiritual power. After drinking it, his whole body felt comfortable. Patriarch Wei brought his men to the inn. As soon as he entered, the innkeeper greeted him. What wind is blowing today? You've brought clan head Wei here. Please come in." "That's enough." Wei clan head waved his hand and looked at the shopkeeper, asking, "What about the girl?" "I want to meet him." Wei clan head, please take a seat first. I'll go to the second floor to inform them." As the shopkeeper spoke, he was pushed aside by the person beside Wei clan head. "No need, we can go up by ourselves." The middle-aged man who pushed the shopkeeper away looked at the patriarch and made an inviting gesture. Patriarch Wei didn't say anything. Instead, he walked straight up to the second floor with his hands behind his back. "Hey, Patriarch Wei, this." Chapter 48-56. Therefore, when he saw them rushing up to the second floor, he fell a few steps behind them before catching up to them. After reaching the second floor, the Wei clan head saw the two women sitting by the window under the guidance of the guard. When he saw the two women, his gaze naturally fell on the woman in red. There was no other reason other than the fact that the woman was too dazzling. She was like a blazing sun emitting a dazzling light, making it difficult for anyone to ignore her. As the clan head, his strength was at the level of a divine king. He could be considered the prettiest among the aristocratic families in the city. What kind of beauty had he not seen before? However, at his age, when he saw the beautiful woman in red, his eyes involuntarily flashed with a touch of amazement. Beautiful. Very beautiful. So beautiful that he could not take his eyes off her. That kind of beauty was not only breathtaking on her appearance, but also a kind of beautiful aura that emanated from her. It was unforgettable for anyone who saw her. However, he was still the clan head after all. After a moment of amazement, he quickly regained his senses and carefully sized her up. He saw that he could not detect the cultivation of this woman in red with an outstanding appearance and temperament. However, her bone age was not even 30 years old. Such an age was extremely young in the immortal cultivation world. At such a young age, even if she was born with a divine fetus, her cultivation would not be that strong. After all, which powerhouse did not cultivate for hundreds or even hundreds of years to reach his level of strength? Due to his underestimation of the woman, even if he could not detect her cultivation, he would still be able to do so. He was certain that her strength was below his. Thus, his gaze shifted again and landed on the young girl who was sitting opposite the red-clothed woman. His gaze swept over her body and he saw an item hanging from her waist. He knew which sect this young girl came from. As for the beast that the two consecrators described as extremely terrifying, he pondered as his gaze fell on the round snow-white little beast. It was so small, just like a little puppy. At this moment, it was holding a bowl and drinking soup like a human. It did not even look in his direction. It was just a gluttonous little beast. Sizing it up at such a close distance, he did not feel any aura of a divine beast emanating from the little beast. "Clan head, it's that young girl," the guard said softly and pointed in Songmi-er's direction. "Miss, are you from the Song clan?" He strode over and looked at Songmi-er with a dignified gaze that carried the pressure of an expert. Songmi-er looked at him and said, "That's right. I'm from the Song clan." Her clan was a clan of culinary cultivators, and they were the only clan in the entire immortal dimension. There was no need to mention their reputation, and all the various clans and sects had more or less heard of her clan. Since you're also a member of an aristocratic family, then you should know that injuring my Wei clan in such a way is an insult to my Wei clan's reputation. Let me ask you, how do you want to resolve this matter today? He clasped his hands behind his back and looked at Songmi-er with a dignified gaze. Fengjiu gently swirled the wine in her hand. She narrowed her eyes as if she didn't hear Patriarch Wei's words. She played with the wine cup in her hand lazily and occasionally took a sip of the wine in the cup. Chapter 48-57. However, in the next moment, a powerful aura enveloped him, causing him to fall to his knees with a thud. Ah! When his knees hit the ground, the blood in his body suddenly surged. A mouthful of blood surged up from his throat and seeped out from the corner of his mouth. Large beads of cold sweat seeped out from his forehead. His face instantly turned pale. His eyes were filled with shock and disbelief as he looked at the woman in red in front of him. "Master! Master!" The few people behind him cried out in alarm. They were so frightened by this sudden change that their faces turned pale. They wanted to step forward, but they found that they couldn't take a step forward at all. It was as if there was a strong pressure blocking them. In that instant, they stared in shock at the woman in red. No one knew what they were thinking, but their bodies trembled uncontrollably and they fell to their knees uncontrollably. The shopkeeper, who had followed behind them, stood at the top of the stairs and did not walk up. At this moment, when he saw everyone from the Wei clan kneeling on the ground, his face was also filled with astonishment. He looked at the red-clothed woman who was still leisurely drinking wine and seemed to have thought of something. His eyes flashed and he quietly retreated downstairs. When he reached the bottom of the stairs, he ran outside and prepared to quickly report to his master. A powerful beast, dressed in red robes with peerlessly beautiful features and unfathomable powers. She was also able to make Master Wei kneel in front of her. It could only be the Phoenix Master who had recently ascended. When he thought of the news that his master had secretly sent to him over the past 2 days, he felt his heart thumping wildly. He was both nervous and excited. It must be the Phoenix Master. It must be. After all, the news of the Northern Flames Emperor's death had not yet spread. However, the aristocratic families and the various organizations all knew that the newly ascended Phoenix Master was the one who had killed the Northern Flames Emperor. At the same time, she had taken over this territory and was now the new Grand Lord. If he were to report this news to his master, he would have done a great service. On the second floor of the inn, by the window, Song Mir watched the scene unfold before her and her eyes sparkled with admiration as she stared at Fingzhou. She knew that her sister was not a simple person. Look, even the master of the Wei family had fallen to his knees. However, who was this sister that I had met on the way here? How could the Wei clan be so frightened? Fengzhou took a sip of wine and gently swirled the wine cup in her hand. She didn't even glance at Patriarch Wei, who was kneeling on the ground, as if she didn't see them kneeling in front of her. With her current status and identity, who would dare to look at her with such an unbridled and invasive gaze? Wasn't this simply courting death? The Wei clan head knelt on the ground. The pressure on his body made him unable to straighten his body. Even his head was lowered. Blood continued to seep out of his mouth, and his face became more and more pale. He wanted to speak, but he couldn't even open his mouth to beg for mercy. In the end, he couldn't hold on any longer and spat out a mouthful of blood. His entire body seemed to have been sucked out of him, and he fainted as well. The members of the Wei clan who were kneeling at the back didn't even dare to say a word. They just kept their heads on the ground and their bodies trembled. At this moment, even if they were allowed to leave, they wouldn't be able to stand up with their weak legs. Chapter 48-58. The Wei clan member fainted from fright when he saw his clan head's cultivation being crippled and how old he looked in an instant. Tan Yun leaped down from his chair, opened his mouth, and tossed them out the window onto the street. The old man who had rushed over after hearing the innkeeper's report was about to enter the inn with another old man and 2 middle-aged men when he saw several objects flying down from the second floor. He hurriedly retreated to avoid them, only to see that it wasn't objects that were thrown down from the second floor, but several people. Among them, there was also a dying old man who had his cultivation crippled and became old. When they saw this scene, the expressions of the people who had come with them changed. The old man in the lead took a deep breath and looked up. When he saw the red figure on the second floor, he hurriedly said to the people behind him, "Follow me in. Remember, do not offend her in the slightest. Otherwise, even I won't be able to protect you." "Yes, we will follow Patriarch's orders." The few of them hurriedly responded respectfully. They restrained their auras and followed behind the old man in an orderly manner. When they reached the second floor, a waiter was trembling as he cleaned up the bloodstains on the floor. When the old man in the lead saw the red figure sitting at the table, he hurriedly stepped forward and bowed. "Greetings, Phoenix Master. It's you." When Fengzhou saw this old man, he raised his brows. "Why are you here?" This old man was the first immortal who had bowed to him that day. His name was Immortal Qinghua. When he heard Fingzhou's words, the old man hurriedly responded with a smile. It is this old man. The Jiang clan of this city is the main clan of this old man's descendants. When I returned to the clan this time, I instructed them to do some things. I didn't expect to hear that the Phoenix Master would appear here, so I brought the clan's descendants to pay respects to the Phoenix Master. As he spoke, he turned slightly to the side and shouted to the people behind him, "Hurry up and pay respects to the Phoenix Master." The old man and two middle-aged men hurriedly stepped forward and respectfully kowtowed to Fingzhou. Jiang clan, Jiang Qinghe. Jiang clan, Jiang Xianren. Jiang clan's descendant, Jiang Xinyi. Greetings, Phoenix Master. After the three of them reported their names, they kowtowed with excitement and reverence. Fingzhou glanced at them and said, "Get up." "Thank you, Phoenix Master." They hurriedly responded, then stood up and respectfully retreated behind their ancestor. However, after sneaking a peek at her on the second floor, they didn't dare to look at her again, for fear of offending this incomparably noble great emperor. "Phoenix Master, I'm afraid that the people at the inn won't be able to serve you well. Why don't you move to the residence to rest?" Immortal Qinghua said as he looked at Fingzhou. "No need, I won't be staying here for long." Fingzhou waved his hand, indicating that there was no need. Hearing this, he continued, "Phoenix Master, we are willing to help you solve your problems. Is there anything you need us to do?" The corners of Fingzhou's lips curled up slightly. He glanced at the people outside who had probably rushed over after hearing the news and said, "The Wei clan is one of the aristocratic families, but they have an undeserved reputation. As the saying goes, if the upper beam is not straight, the lower beam will be crooked. A family like this is truly unworthy of being an aristocratic family in this city." Immortal Qinghua's heart moved when he heard this. He immediately said, "Don't worry, Phoenix Master. Leave this matter to this old man. I will definitely give Phoenix Master a satisfactory result. All of you can leave. Tell them not to come up and disturb my peace and quiet." Fengzhou said as he raised his wine cup and took a sip. Chapter 48-59. After they left, the second floor became quiet again. Only Fingzhou, Songmi, and the little beast remained. Seeing Songmi staring at her with wide eyes and a look of surprise, she couldn't help but chuckle. "What's wrong? Are you very surprised?" "Phoenix Master." Songmi muttered. That's what they call me." Fingzhou nodded with a smile on her face. "Heavens! I actually called you big sister the whole way. I actually got along with you the whole way. This isn't a dream, right?" Songmi covered her mouth with both hands, still finding it hard to believe. She guessed that her status should not be low. Perhaps she was someone from a hidden family or someone who was being groomed as the next successor. However, she did not expect that she was not from a family, but the mysterious Empress Phoenix Master who had just ascended not too long ago. Seeing her surprised and shocked expression, Fingzhou chuckled. Holding her chin with one hand, she sighed, "What's there to be surprised about? Although my identity is a little extraordinary, I can't even find a cook with good culinary skills." Hearing this, Songmi was stunned for a moment. Then she patted her chest and looked at her with a fawning expression. "Big sister, I'll go back with you. I'll make delicious food for you. In the future, I'll follow you wherever you go. I'll take care of all your meals." She would be stupid to refuse such a good thing. She didn't know her identity before, but now that she knew, she was naturally happy. Moreover, she knew that almighty people like them all had a floating immortal island. That place was filled with immortal qi and was extremely beneficial for cultivation. If she followed her, there would only be benefits and no harm. Moreover, she liked to cook and her big sister liked to eat. Fingyo raised her eyebrows and glanced at her. You've decided? Amen. I've decided, I won't regret it. Songmi hurriedly said. Looking at her, she hesitated for a moment and asked, then should I call you Phoenix Master in the future, or should I continue to call you Big Sister? Hearing this, Fingyo smiled and said, you've been shouting all the way. Don't you think it's a little late to ask now? Hearing this, Songmi smiled happily. Sis, you're the best. If she didn't agree, she wouldn't have let her call her that all the way. Speaking of which, her luck was really good. She was able to cozy up to someone powerful when she was traveling. If her father and brothers knew about this, they would probably be dumbfounded. The two people downstairs were chatting casually. Downstairs, immortal elder Qinghua had stopped the people from a clan that had rushed over from the city outside the inn. When he saw that the people from the Wei clan had also arrived, he walked up to stop them and at the same time, brought them to the side to talk. Because of what happened today and the news of the Phoenix Master being here spread, the news of the Northern Flame Emperor's death spread like a feather being blown away by the wind. The news of the Phoenix Master taking over the Northern Flame Emperor's territory and becoming the new ruler of the Northern Flame Emperor's territory also spread like wildfire. There was another piece of news. Before the sky darkened, the Wei clan that had hundreds of years of history was stripped of their status as a noble clan. Overnight, the Wei clan went into hiding and wouldn't come out for 100 years. Chapter 4860. Halfway up a remote mountain, in front of a simple thatched hut, a large plot of land had been dug out to plant vegetables. At this time, a burly man in gray who looked to be about 40 years old was holding a hoe in his hand and digging up the soil. Sweat seeped from his tanned forehead, dripping down his cheeks and dripping onto the soil. The man worked in the field and every time he swung his hoe, he would release some sweat. The sound of the hoe digging into the soil became a unique sound in this quiet place. Inside the thatched hut, a white-haired old woman walked out with a bamboo basket in one hand and a water bottle in the other. Her hair was white and her face was covered in wrinkles. Her back was slightly bent and her figure was small and thin. Every step she took was very slow. When the man swinging the hoe saw the old woman walking towards him, he quickly put down the hoe in his hand and quickly walked forward. He took the things in her hand and put them to the side. He held her hand and scolded, "Didn't you say you didn't need to give me water and food? It's so close. If I'm hungry or thirsty, I'll go home to drink." As he said this, he held her hand and took the cloth covering the basket and put it on the ground. "Come, sit down." The old woman revealed a smile and warmly said, "I can still carry this. It's not heavy." As she said this, she poured a cup of water for him and pulled him to the side to sit down. She said, "Drink a cup of water. Look at how much sweat you're sweating." As she said this, she took out a handkerchief and helped him wipe the sweat off his face. The man sat beside her and looked at her with a gentle gaze. He allowed her to help him wipe off his sweat. Looking at her gentle gaze, she carefully helped him wipe off his sweat. He held her hand and said, "All right, there's no need to wipe. Sit for a while and the sweat will dry." As he said this, he drank the water in the cup and poured another cup for her. "You should also drink a cup. It's hot today, drink more water." The old woman smiled and took the teacup in his hand. She held the teacup with both hands. Because she was old, her hands were slightly trembling and the water in the cup was also gently swaying. Seeing this, the man's heart ached and a trace of pain flashed through his eyes. However, the pain in his eyes disappeared in an instant. When he saw her look at him after drinking the water, a smile appeared on his face again and he picked up the cornbread in the basket to eat. The old woman sat beside him with one hand held by him. She looked at the vegetable field in front of her and her old voice was gentle as she said, "These vegetables are growing very well. They can be picked in a few days. When the time comes, I'll dry them and make dried vegetables for you to eat in the future. Dry them and make them into dried vegetables. We can eat them in the future." The man who was eating cornbread emphasized and looked at her. Hearing this, the old woman smiled helplessly. "All right, we'll eat them together after they're dried." Hearing this, the man smiled and pointed to the half-plowed open space in front of them. "By tonight, I'll be done plowing this new piece of land. When the time comes, I'll move 2 fruit trees to the left and right sides. Next year, we can eat the fruits we planted. What do you think we should plant in the middle?" The two sat in front of the vegetable field and chatted. The surroundings were quiet, only the sound of the wind and their low voices could be heard. Chapter 48-61. The man was in the prime of his life, with a muscular body and a well-defined face. He could not be considered handsome, but he was definitely a tough man. As for the old woman, her hair was white and her face was full of wrinkles. Not only was she old, she did not seem to have much longer to live. However, the two of them interacted like husband and wife, their actions filled with affection and gentleness. Separated by a distance, Song Mi-er could not hear clearly what they were saying, but Fingzhou heard everything clearly. It was an ordinary interaction in the quiet years, filled with warmth and affection, looking forward to life and the future. Her gaze could not help but size up the two people who were in the man's embrace, their heads leaning on the man's chest. With her cultivation, she could see that the man's bone age was not young, but because of his cultivation, he could maintain the appearance of a middle-aged man. As for the old woman, she didn't sound very confident. She probably had a fatal internal injury and was at the last moment of her life. Judging from her aura, she only had 3 to 5 months to live at most. However, facing such a faded old woman, the man's face was filled with gentleness, his eyes filled with affection. She had to admit that her heart was moved. This was definitely a pair of true love. "Sister, isn't that old woman the middle-aged man's mother? Why are they hugging?" Song Mi-er found it strange and could not help but ask in a low voice. "Looks like they should be husband and wife," Fingzhou said with a trace of gentleness in her eyes. Hearing this, Song Mi-er was startled. Looking at the two people leaning against each other, she did not ask any more questions. Instead, she looked left and right and said, "Sister, we have searched the entire mountain. There is only this straw hut and this pair of husband and wife here. We did not see the residence of the Iron Bone Armament Master. So, did we find the wrong place? We'll know if we ask," Fingzhou said and walked forward. Previously, because Fingzhou had concealed their auras, the middle-aged man did not notice that there was someone around. At this time, as Fingzhou and Song Mi-er approached, the middle-aged man holding the old woman frowned and turned to look at them. "Sorry to disturb you too." Fingzhou showed an apologetic smile. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" the man asked, standing up and staring at the two. Song Mi-er smiled and said, "Uncle, we just want to ask if the Iron Bone Refiner is on this mountain. We've searched all around but did not find him. There is no armament master here, you found the wrong place," the man said, while putting the teapot and cups away, and prepared to lead the old woman back. Fingzhou's gaze fell on the hoe, and her eyes flashing. The old woman smiled apologetically at the two of them. She didn't say anything and just let the man lead her back. "Sister," he said, "there is no armament master. Did we really find the wrong place?" Song Mi-er's gaze fell on the two who left, then looked at the simple thatched hut not far away, and frowned in deep thought. Fingzhou smiled, "No, we didn't find the wrong place, it's here." As she spoke, she walked unhurriedly behind the two of them while looking at the vegetables planted in their fields. Chapter 48-62. After the two entered the thatched hut, the door closed behind them, completely ignoring Fingzhou and Songmi. Fingzhou didn't mind, sitting down at the table outside. She propped her chin on one hand and looked around. It's a little crude, but the air is good and it's very quiet. Songmi looked around. This place is too quiet. Only the two of them live here, and it's halfway up the mountain. There's a lot of trees around here, and there might even be beasts at night. It's also too far from the city. It's not convenient to go to the market. Hearing this, Fengzhou chuckled and said, everyone yearns for a different life. Although this place is a little simple, how can you be sure that they won't be happy when they have someone they love to accompany them? Songmi thought for a moment. Sis, that man must love his wife very much. My mother said that men in this world value appearances. They all like young, beautiful women with good figures. It's rare to find a man who doesn't value appearances but values inner beauty. Fingzhou smiled and looked around, gently tapping the table. I just came here not long ago. I only know that this iron bone refiner is very good at refining weapons, but I didn't expect him to be such a sentimental person. Ah. Songmi looked at her in surprise, then at the closed door. She pointed inside. Sis, you're saying that the man we're looking for is that uncle? Other than him, who else would be able to refine a hoe into a weapon? Fengzhou said casually, her gaze landing on the vegetable field not far away. Songmi heard her and immediately walked over to where the hoe was. After a closer look, she couldn't help but exclaim, it's true. Such a weapon was left here just like that. And a hoe can be refined like that. It's amazing. The two of them didn't lower their voices. With the distance between the inside and outside of the thatched hut, the two of them could hear the conversation outside. The man frowned, while the old woman patted his hand. That lady in red is amazing. She could tell at a glance and guessed your identity. The old woman said gently, with a trace of surprise and admiration in her voice. All these years, they've been living in seclusion here. It wasn't that no one came to look for them, but only one lady in red could recognize them at a glance. You rest here, I'll chase them away. The man said, then stood up and walked out. The old woman quickly said, don't scare the lady. Just let them go. I know. The man replied, then opened the door and walked out. He saw the lady in red leisurely sitting by the table, resting, with one hand holding her chin, her eyes looking forward. We don't welcome outsiders here. The two of you should leave quickly. The man walked up to Fengzhou and said in a deep voice. Uncle, we're here to ask you to help us refine a kitchen knife. She ran over and looked at him excitedly. Uncle Iron, tell me, as long as you're willing to refine a kitchen knife for me, what do you want in return? I'll definitely find a way to get it for you. Seeing that the hoe could be refined into such a sharp weapon, Songmi looked forward to it even more. If he could refine a kitchen knife, perhaps it would be able to cut through the bones of those fierce beasts. Chapter 48-63. Cough cough. 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 A few low, suppressed coughs came from inside the house. Upon hearing the coughs, the man could not be bothered to chase the two people outside away. Instead, he could not help but nervously run into the house. What's wrong? Why are you coughing again? Drink a glass of water to calm yourself down. The man hurriedly poured her a glass of water and carefully handed it to her to drink. However, who knew that the old woman would start coughing again after taking a sip? She could only feel a gush of qi and blood surging upwards. The water that she had not swallowed yet was spat out along with the surging qi and blood. Pfft! Yun Yang! The man cried out in alarm as his expression changed drastically. Outside, Fengjiu heard the man's cry of alarm and immediately got up to walk in. When she came in, she saw the old woman spitting out blood and fainting with a pale face. "Quick, carry her to the bed," Fengjiu said. When the man heard Fengjiu's words, he hurriedly carried the unconscious woman in his arms and strode towards the bed while shouting, Yun Yang, wake up. Don't scare me, don't scare me. The dignified man's eyes turned red at this moment. Tears welled up in his eyes and even his voice became choked with sobs. After placing her on the bed, he still held her hand by the bed and shouted, Yun Yang, wake up. Move aside, I'll take a look at her, Fengjiu said. Just as she was about to walk forward, she was pushed away by the red-eyed man. Go away. Go away. Don't touch my Yun Yang. Go away. The man shouted angrily. He was furious that this unknown woman was trying to get close to the most important person in his life. Fengjiu didn't argue with him when she saw that he was deeply in love with her. However, when she looked at the old woman who was lying on the bed with a weak aura, she couldn't bear to see this pair of lovers be separated forever. I'm proficient in medicine. She has an old illness that has dragged on for many years. It's already not easy for her to hold on until now. Now that she's vomiting blood, her condition has worsened. If you don't let me treat her, she won't live past today, Fengjiu said faintly. He did not step forward. He only stood 3 steps away from the bed and looked at the crazy man. When the man heard this, there was a struggle in his eyes. He didn't know where these 2 people came from, but he knew the condition of his beloved's body. But if he were to let these strangers treat his beloved, his heart was struggling. In the end, she was frightened by the words that if she didn't receive treatment, she wouldn't be able to live past today. He stood up and silently retreated, but his gaze was fixed on the red-clothed woman's movements, afraid that she would do something bad to him. Song Mi-er saw that he was staring at Fengjiu like a crazed wolf and said, Uncle Tai, don't worry. We're not bad people. We won't do anything to hurt you. However, the man did not say a word. It was as if he did not hear anything. He only stared at Fengjiu. After taking her pulse, she took out her silver needles to treat her. Seeing how skillful she was with the needles, he pursed his lips and resisted the urge to snatch the needles away. Feng Nine didn't pay attention to him. Instead, she focused on giving emergency treatment to the old woman on the bed. As time went by, the old woman who had fainted gradually woke up. At this time, Feng Nine was also withdrawing the silver needles that were inserted into her acupuncture points one by one. Chapter 48-64. Yun Yang, how are you feeling? Do you feel any discomfort? He asked anxiously as he held her hand. The old woman on the bed gently shook her head and tried to sit up. At this moment, Fengjiu said, you should just lie down. The spiritual energy in your body has almost dried up. For the rest of the time, it's best for you to lie down on the bed to avoid something like what happened just now. If it wasn't for my big sister's acupuncture, you probably wouldn't have woken up. So you'd better listen to her, Song Mi said from the side. Thank you, young miss. The old woman's voice was weak as she thanked her. She did not try to sit up and instead lay down on the bed. She looked at the man holding her hand with a trace of sadness and reluctance. Thank you. I've offended you just now. Please don't take offense. The man stood up and bowed to Fengjiu as he spoke apologetically. It's fine, Fengjiu said casually. Her gaze swept past the man and landed on the old woman on the bed. I just took her pulse and found out that not only does she have an old illness, her inner core is also broken, causing her spiritual energy to leak out. She's unable to cultivate to recover it, right? Seeing her skillful treatment and the fact that Yun Yang woke up not long after the needle was inserted, the man knew that she was an expert in medicine. He did not hide it from her and nodded. Yes. Since the inner core is broken and caused spiritual energy to leak out, why didn't you repair it? Fengzhou asked with a trace of confusion. She asked this naturally, but the people who heard her were all stunned. Their faces were filled with astonishment and disbelief. Young miss, why you said a broken inner core can be repaired? I didn't hear wrong, did I? The man asked with a trembling voice. His expression carried a trace of excitement and caution. Which cultivator didn't know that a broken inner core meant death when spiritual energy leaked out? Who had the ability to repair a broken inner core? No one had ever heard of such a thing. Seeing this, Fengzhou raised her brows and looked at Song Mir. Are there no pill refiners or doctors here who can repair a broken inner core? Song Mir shook her head. Big sister, once the inner core is broken, spiritual energy will leak out. No one can repair it. You can only wait for death. As she spoke, her gaze turned and landed on her astonished face. She asked curiously, Big sister, you can repair a broken inner core? At this moment, the man fell to his knees and begged, Young miss, please save my Yun Yang. As long as you're willing to help me save Yun Yang, I'll do anything. Feng Jiu smiled when she heard that. She glanced at the old woman on the bed and said to the man, If I want you and your wife to come with me, will you agree? Hearing this, the man paused for a moment and didn't immediately answer. This was because he didn't know where this lady in red came from. Why did she want them to go with her? Feng Jiu wasn't in a hurry. She walked to the table and sat down. She said slowly, Don't worry. I won't ask you to do anything hurtful. I just like your craftsmanship, so I want you to work for me. Then, she paused. If you don't agree, it's fine. I can extend her life for 3 years, but you have to refine a knife in exchange. Chapter 48-65. After a while, his eyes were filled with determination. He raised his head to look at Fengzhou and said in a low voice, As long as my lady can save Yun Yang's life, my life is yours. Hearing this, Fengzhou smiled and looked at him meaningfully, You won't regret your decision today. Yun Yang, who was lying on the bed, looked at the man and tears streamed down her cheeks. It was all because of her. If it wasn't for her, he wouldn't have to do this. They didn't know the background of this red-robed lady. Who was she? If in the future, it's impossible for her to recover in a short period of time, I will stay behind to treat her. As for you, Mir needs a knife. As for what kind of knife it is, you can discuss it yourselves. Fengzhou said to the man, but her gaze was fixed on Song Mir. But Yun Yang. The man was worried. I'm here with her. You won't be of much help here. I don't like people around when I'm treating her. Fengzhou said slowly. Hearing this, the man thought for a moment before replying, All right, I understand. Thus, the man and Mir left the room. Mir told him about the saber she wanted. She told him what it was mainly used for and how big it should be. After the two men left the room, Yun Yang looked at Fengzhou from the bed and asked in a weak voice, My lady, why do you want us to follow you? Aren't you worried, my lady? Hearing this, Fengzhou smiled. She stood up and walked to the bed, worried about what? Worried that you'll go back on your word after I treat you. Or worried about your character. She didn't give her a chance to speak. She sat down on the bed and smiled. I believe that I have a good eye for people. Besides, I've just obtained a new place. It's big, but I don't have many people to order around. If I find a few pleasing to the eye, there's no harm in bringing back a few of them. Yunyang didn't expect to hear such words. She stared blankly at her and didn't know what to say for a moment. Open your mouth. Fengzhou took out a pill. Yunyang instinctively opened her mouth and felt that something was thrown into her mouth and slid down her throat. A faint medicinal taste spread in her mouth, accompanied by a rich and pure spiritual aura. She was stunned for a moment. Immediately after, she felt a warm flow of spiritual energy begin to flow through her body. She only felt a burst of comfort all over her body and she didn't know how she fell asleep. At this moment, Fengzhou placed his hand on her chest and sent a strand of green lotus qi into her body, slowly repairing her shattered Niden. However, because her Niden had been broken for 1 or 2 years, she was afraid that her body wouldn't be able to bear it if she wanted to repair it in a short period of time. Therefore, she could only take it slowly. Outside, the man took out a crafting furnace and tools about 100 meters away from the house. He selected a piece of black iron and started to burn it in the furnace. When Fengzhou came out of the house, she saw that the man had already started to refine weapons. She smiled with satisfaction and took out a soft couch from her space and placed it in a cool place in front of the house. She took out some spiritual wine and drank it. She half closed her eyes and enjoyed the tranquility of the mountainside. Chapter 48-66. Fengzhou tilted her head slightly and poured some wine into her mouth. After taking a sip, she smiled and said, "No need." Aside from the power of the green lotus, she also had all kinds of pills in the space. Naturally, she didn't need to brew any medicine. "Big sis, how do you know medicine as well? Also, I've never heard of anyone who knows how to repair inner cores." Song Mi looked at her with admiration and asked with a smile, "Big sis, is there anything you don't know?" Fengzhou smiled and leisurely drank her wine. "It's hard to say because I'm proficient in a lot of things." She even knew how to refine weapons, but she was too lazy to do so. The two chatted outside for a while before Song Mi went to prepare the meal, leaving Fengzhou to rest. The days in the mountains were very quiet and boring. There was nothing else to pass the time. Therefore, in the past 3 days, Fengzhou spent most of her time lying on the soft couch and rubbing Tunyun from the space. The man didn't want the sound of forging to disturb her rest, so he stayed 100 meters away from her. There were also some trees in between. Therefore, other than having her vision obstructed, the sound was also much quieter. However, for someone of Fengzhou's cultivation, the sound of forging could still be heard clearly. Especially when the man was forging day and night. In the past 3 days, the sound of hammering hadn't stopped at all. Song Mi came out of the house with an empty bowl in her hand. She came to Fengzhou's side with a smile and said, "Big sis, Yuanyang finished her porridge and said she feels much better. Can she get out of bed and walk around? Let her continue to lie down and take care of her body. When she can get out of bed and walk around, I'll let her down." Fengzhou didn't even open her eyes. Her hand on her abdomen gently tapped along with the sound of hammering. "All right, I'll go talk to her," Song Mi said as she ran back inside. After a while, she came out. 2 days later, Fengzhou said to Yunyang, who was lying on the bed, "Come down and walk around today. Go and wash up." Hearing this, Yunyang, who had been lying on the bed for 5 days, was overjoyed. A gentle smile appeared on her face, and she said, "Miss, I feel that the spiritual power in my body has gradually condensed. Am I going to recover soon?" It would be a lie to say that they were not shocked. In just 5 days, she had changed from a weak 70 to 80 years old woman to a 40 years old woman. Although the white hair on her head had not turned black like before, half of it was black. Not only that, her body had also returned to the state when she was 40 years old. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, they would not have dared to believe that she would have such a day. Fengjiu slowly walked out and said, "If you want to fully recover, it will take about a month or so. However, your inner core is gradually recovering and your internal injuries are about 70 to 80% better. It's only a matter of time before you recover to your peak. Alright, go and wash up." Seeing her leave, Yunyang impatiently got out of bed and went to the bath water that Mi-er had prepared for her. Looking at her reflection in the water, she could not help but tear up. Chapter 48-67. Outside, 100 meters away, the iron hammer was still hammering away at the red-hot piece of iron. The originally unremarkable piece of black iron had now taken on a rough shape. Sweat poured all over his body, drying and wetting and drying again. The man was focused on hammering the iron and refining the weapon. He hammered again and again in a serious and focused manner. Every time he hammered down on the red-hot piece of iron, traces of fire would appear on it. Looking at the newly formed piece of iron, he placed it in the water and soaked it for a while. When the red-hot piece of iron came into contact with the water, it immediately made a hissing sound and the water began to bubble. He stopped to rest for a while and wiped the sweat off his face. He then looked in the direction of the house and thought for a moment. It had been 5 days and he was still a little worried. Thus, he walked back to see how Yunyang was doing. When he arrived at the front of the house, he saw the young lady in red resting on the soft couch in front of the house with a snow-white pet lying in her arms. Song Mi-er was picking vegetables in the vegetable field. "Uncle Iron, do you want to see Yunyang? She should be bathing right now." Mi-er raised her head from the vegetable field and smiled at him. Seeing that he was covered in sweat, she put down what she was doing and quickly walked back to the table in front of the house to pour him a glass of water. "Uncle Iron, it's been hard on you these past few days. Quickly drink a glass of water to quench your thirst." Hearing Mi-er say that Yunyang was bathing, he was startled but did not go in. Instead, he took the water she poured and thanked her, "Many thanks." After drinking the water, he paused and asked worriedly, "How has Yunyang been these past few days? Has her spirit been better?" Song Mi-er smiled and nodded, "Don't worry, she's been well these past few days. It's fine, don't worry. Big sister has been letting her lie in bed for the past few days. She's only been allowed to get out of bed today so you'll be able to see her after bathing." Hearing her words, his anxious heart relaxed. After putting the cup on the table, he went to the door and waited. Hearing some soft sounds coming from inside, similar to the sound of clothes being put on, he could not help but feel nervous. With her body in that state, would it be too difficult for her to bathe and put on her own clothes? What if water splashed on the ground and she accidentally fell? Her current body couldn't withstand such a fall. The more he thought about it, the more worried he became. Therefore, he called out anxiously from outside, "Yunyang, are you taking a bath? Be careful, the floor is slippery. Don't slip. Just wear your clothes. I'll help you dry your hair." "You." Fengjiu couldn't help but laugh when she heard his words. She secretly shook her head. Before he could finish his sentence, the tightly shut door opened. Yunyang, who was dressed in plain clothes, stood at the door. Her face was a little red, and she seemed to be a little embarrassed as she glared at the man who was staring at her blankly. Miss and the others are all here. What nonsense are you talking about? Although the two of them had always been in love, when he said those words in front of the two young ladies, she felt a little embarrassed. After all, they were already so old. You young. How did you become younger? He stared at her blankly, as if he couldn't come back to his senses. Chapter 48-68. Hearing this, he stepped forward excitedly and grabbed her arm with both hands. He wanted to say something but did not know what to say. In the end, he just kept saying, "That's great, that's great." After a while, he came back to his senses and hurriedly turned to Fingzhou and knelt down. "Thank you, Mississippi." "Thank you, miss." "All right, it's not a big deal. Besides, she hasn't fully recovered yet," Fingzhou said gently. If he did not believe it before, at this moment, when he saw Yunyang's recovered appearance, other than excitement, there was only endless joy and anticipation in his heart. At this moment, to them, it was like a new life. In order to treat Yunyang, he had sought many famous doctors and alchemists, but none of them had the ability to restore the inner core. He did not expect that he would encounter their chance of survival here. "I'll continue to refine the saber now," he said with a big smile on his face. After patting Yunyang's hand, he did not wait for Fingzhou to say anything and turned to continue refining the saber. At this moment, the blood in his body was surging. He was excited, as if he had nowhere to release his strength. After thinking about it, only refining weapons could calm him down. Fingzhou narrowed her eyes and listened to the sound of forging. She thought in her mind. In the future, after she had dealt with those enemies in the immortal realm, she would think of a way to open up the separated heaven realm. At that time, she would bring her family up to live together. Thinking about it, the corners of her lips could not help but curl up slightly. Her mood also soared. At that time, they could live any kind of life they wanted, including her 3 children. Speaking of which, she had been here for some time, but she had not been able to visit them. She wondered how they were doing at Emperor Qing's place. Did they lose weight? Or did they gain weight? Or did they grow taller? Accompanied by these distracting thoughts, she gradually fell asleep in the gentle breeze. Seeing that she had fallen asleep, took out a blanket from the space and covered her. Then, she went to the vegetable field with Yunyang. A few days later, in the morning, was cooking porridge and making breakfast. The man who had been refining the saber walked over with a smile on his face. Why don't you try this saber?" He handed her a sharp kitchen knife and said, "This was refined according to your instructions. Since you are a woman, this kitchen knife is mainly light and sharp. I slightly modified it according to your instructions. Come, give it a try." Mi's eyes lit up when she saw the kitchen knife that was thinner and thinner than an ordinary kitchen knife. She quickly took it and examined it. "Uncle Iron, this looks thin and smaller than an ordinary kitchen knife. Can it cut cow bones?" she asked curiously as she touched the blade lovingly. Ha, of course it's possible. Furthermore, this is made of black iron. I've even refined a defensive array on it. If necessary, it can be used as a weapon. Just use it for now. In the future, I'll refine a better one for you." He laughed heartily as he spoke. "Okay, thank you, Uncle Iron." Songmir thanked him happily and couldn't wait to go to the kitchen with the knife. Chapter 48-69. There's no need to go to the trouble of boiling water. I'll just take a cold bath at the stream, he said with a grin. She knew that he usually took cold baths, so she didn't say anything else. Instead, she smiled gently and said, "Then I'll prepare some food for you. You can eat it when you come back." "All right." He nodded and turned to leave. As Yunyang's health was getting better and the knife that wanted had been refined, Fengzhou brought them down the mountain after lunch. "Sister, where are we going now?" asked as she looked at Fengzhou beside her. Fengzhou walked at a steady pace and said, "Let's go back first. We've been out for some time, so we should go back and take a look in case anything happens." The two people behind her couldn't help but look at each other when they heard this. Up until now, they still didn't know who she was. Where was she taking them? However, since they had already agreed, they naturally wouldn't go back on their word. Therefore, they didn't ask any further. It wasn't until Fengzhou took them to the floating immortal island in the flying ship that Yunyang couldn't help but ask, "Miss, we still don't know your name. May I know?" "My name is Fengzhou." She sat at the front of the ship and smiled as she drank some spiritual wine. However, it would have been better if they hadn't asked. Now that they asked, they were stunned when they heard this name. The surname Feng. "I don't think I've heard of any family with the surname Feng. May I know where Miss family is located?" Songmi, who was eating a fruit at the side, smiled and said, "There wasn't in the past, but there was recently. The Phoenix Master who had just ascended is you, sister." "Ah!" The two of them couldn't help but exclaim. They used to live on the mountain and didn't know much about the outside world. Naturally, they didn't know that there was a Phoenix Master who had just ascended. Thus, told them about everything that had happened during this period of time. The two of them were pleasantly surprised as they listened. They didn't expect that the person they had met so carelessly would be a supreme great emperor. Moreover, she was the only female emperor among all the great emperors. "Young miss, we really have eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai. Please don't take offense." The two of them hurriedly knelt down and bowed. "There aren't so many rules around me. Get up." As Fengzhou spoke, he took a sip of wine. Looking at them, he said, "From now on, all of you will stay in my spiritual island immortal residence. There aren't many people here now, but it will be very lively in the future." "Yes, thank you, young miss," the two of them replied. They looked at each other and smiled. They had never imagined that they would encounter such an opportunity. They would naturally cherish it. As the spaceship flew, Feng Jiu suddenly raised her eyebrows and looked outside the spaceship. The man seemed to have sensed something as well. He quickly looked out of the spaceship and saw a group of people chasing after them. Some of them were riding on birds, while others were riding on flying swords. They looked menacing. "Miss, there's a group of about 30 to 40 people chasing after us. They're gradually forming a formation to outflank us." He turned around and said to Fengzhou. Chapter 48-70. When the flying ship landed, it happened to land beside a stream. The few of them alighted from the flying ship. Fengzhou waved his sleeves and kept the flying ship. At the same time, the people who chased after them came to surround them. "Big brother, there are only these few people. Looks like we've struck gold today," a cultivator said as he glanced at the few of them. Then, his gaze landed on Fengzhou, who was dressed in red. His eyes were filled with amazement. "Big brother, there's an extremely beautiful woman here." At this moment, a man in his 30s came down from a flying beast. He held a triangular blade in his hand and walked forward. He was dressed in a black robe and there was a black cross mark on the left side of his face. His gaze was cold and his body was filled with a bloodthirsty aura. When his gaze, which was as cold as a venomous snake's, swept past the few of them and landed on Fingzhou, there was a flash of amazement in his eyes. His cold gaze stared at him as if he was staring at his prey. Tai Song, who was holding Yunyang's hand, saw this and frowned. He took a step forward and stood in front of Fingzhou, blocking the man's gaze from Fingzhou. At the same time, his deep voice was heard. Bone-devouring Azura. You should know that there are some people you can't provoke. If you don't want to die, you'd better leave quickly. Haha! The man laughed softly. His voice was so cold that it made people shiver. He stared at Tai Song and sized him up. Those who have seen me are all dead. How did you recognize me? Tai Song stared at the triangular blade in his hand and said, Isn't the triangular blade the weapon that you always carry with you? I've never seen you before, but I know the weapon in your hand. I see. He nodded and stared at him. His smile was as cold as a venomous snake's. So what if you recognize me? Those who have seen me must die. You're no exception. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned the triangular blade in his hand and immediately attacked him. It was so fast that it brought about a sharp and cold wind blade. When the surrounding people saw this, they just surrounded him and jeered. Kill him, kill him. They knew their big brother's rules. When he killed someone, he didn't like them to help in a group fight. Unless he gave the order for them to go forward and fight, otherwise, they would only anger him. In his own words, there was no one that he, the bone-devouring Azura, couldn't kill if he wanted to. He didn't even need the help of others. Seeing the three-edged sword coming towards him, Tai Song stepped forward. At the same time, he turned his hand and a large sword appeared in his hand. He slashed down horizontally, and a powerful aura of spiritual energy burst out along with the collision of the two swords. The collision of the two swords created a clanging sound and sparks from the friction. Behind them, Fingzhou watched the scene with an indifferent expression. She did not make a move, nor did she make a sound. She just watched quietly. No one knew what she was thinking. Song Mir knew that she was no match for the man and naturally did not dare to make a move. Instead, she stood beside Fingzhou. She knew that there was nowhere safer than being by her side. Yunyang was a little worried and nervous. Because Tai Song had not fought for a long time, she didn't know if he was a match for the bone-devouring Azura. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.